You ever sit at a family dinner thinking you're safe, only to have someone take a knife, not to your back, but straight to your face while smiling? That was my sister, and what she didn't expect was that I'd hit back harder. Much harder. Take a moment and hear me out, because this story still burns fresh in my chest. And if you feel something while listening, go ahead and show some love by liking, sharing, or even subscribing. So I was invited over to my sister Catherine's house for dinner. She's older than me by 6 years, always been the golden child. You know the type, perfect house, perfect husband, perfect smile. I brought my boyfriend, Derek, and everything seemed fine at first. The table was full, the kids were running around, and Catherine was acting like the perfect hostess. But then, out of nowhere, she started bringing up things from my teenage years. Embarrassing stuff. Remember when you tried to dye your hair and it turned green? She laughed. Everyone chuckled. I forced a smile. Then she went further. Or that time you cried because your crush didn't show up for the dance? My face went cold. That was private. I'd told her that in confidence years ago, and I had buried it deep. Derek looked at me, confused. Catherine's husband, Mark, smiled awkwardly like he didn't know where to look. I sat there, feeling like the room was spinning, my dignity melting in front of people I cared about. But I didn't say a word. I just smiled, swallowed the lump in my throat, and kept eating. What Catherine didn't know was that I had something on her. A secret she once begged me never to tell. A year ago, she came to me crying, saying she had made a mistake. She had slept with a co-worker named Daniel. She swore it was just one night. I believed her, until I caught her sneaking out with him again. And again. I said nothing because of her kids. But that night, after dinner, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling in Derek's apartment and thought, she humiliated me in front of everyone like it meant nothing. Like I was still a silly little girl she could poke at for laughs. Something in me snapped. I wasn't that girl anymore. I was a woman, and I had kept her secret out of kindness. But maybe kindness wasn't what she needed. So I got out of bed, pulled out an old folder on my phone where I'd saved some screenshots, just in case. Pictures of her and Daniel. A text where she said, "Mark is too boring for me." I stared at it for a long time, then took a deep breath. If she wanted to play dirty, she had no idea who she was messing with. A year before that awful dinner, I remember Catherine showing up at my apartment looking like she'd seen a ghost. Her hands were shaking, and her eyes were red from crying. I thought something terrible had happened, maybe to the kids or Mark. But no, it was something else entirely. "I messed up," she whispered, sitting on my couch like her body had turned to stone. "It was just one time. I didn't plan for it to happen. It meant nothing. I didn't understand at first." Then she told me. His name was Daniel, a co-worker, married, and definitely not her husband. I was stunned. This was my perfect sister, always judging me, always above everything. And now she was confessing she had cheated? She cried for over an hour, swearing it was a moment of weakness, that it would never happen again. She begged me not to tell anyone, especially not Mark. "For the kids," she said, her voice cracking. "They don't deserve to lose their family over one mistake." So I kept her secret. I locked it away deep inside me. But not long after that, I saw her again, outside a coffee shop, with Daniel, and not in a friendly way. His hand was on her back. She was laughing, leaning close, like nothing had changed. I froze. She didn't even see me. I watched her sneak off with him 3 more times over the next few months. Still, I said nothing. I told myself it wasn't my business, that I was being a good sister. But after what she did to me at that dinner, dragging up my worst memories just for laughs, I started questioning everything. Why did I stay loyal to someone who never showed me the same respect? That night after dinner, when I couldn't sleep, I opened my laptop and searched my old email threads. I found a few vague messages she had sent me, warnings to keep things quiet, one even thanking me for being her rock. Then I checked my photos. I had snapped one picture of her and Daniel in a car together a few months ago. I had saved it out of instinct, and there it was proof. I also remembered something about a second phone she kept for work. Piece by piece, I started pulling together a puzzle I never wanted to touch. But now I was ready to hold it up to the light. Because if Catherine could humiliate me in front of everyone with a smile, maybe it was time the world saw who she really was. I told Catherine I needed a ride to our parents' house for Sunday lunch. She happily offered, like nothing had happened between us the week before. Like she hadn't humiliated me in front of my boyfriend and hers. Her smile was fake, but I returned it. I had a plan now, and it needed perfect timing. After lunch, I forgot my purse in her car on purpose. I called her a few hours later, asking if I could swing by and grab it. She said sure, she'd leave the car unlocked. I thanked her sweetly. When I arrived, I opened the passenger door and climbed in, pretending to reach for my purse under the seat. I glanced around, then opened the glove compartment slowly, my heart pounding. There it was. A cheap black burner phone, stuffed behind some tissues and receipts. I stared at it for a second, not believing she was this careless. I powered it on, and within seconds, everything lit up. Messages from Daniel. Dozens of them. Some were just flirty, can't stop thinking about last night. But others were explicit, raw, even cruel. One message said, "Mark's so clueless, it's almost sad." Another talked about meeting up at a hotel the night Catherine had told her family she was working late. I felt a lump rise in my throat. I took photos of every message, scrolling quickly but carefully. I didn't know if she had a tracking app on the phone or if she even checked it regularly, but I wasn't going to waste time. The last thing I wanted was to get caught in her car with a phone that could ruin her whole life. Once I had what I needed, I turned it off, tucked it back into its place, and quietly shut the glove box. Then I grabbed my purse from the back seat, walked away like nothing happened, and drove home. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, staring out into the dark. My phone lay next to me, full of evidence. I kept looking at the photos, reading the messages again and again. Part of me still couldn't believe it. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. This was a full-on double life, and I had the key to burn it all down. But a small voice inside whispered, "Are you really about to destroy her marriage? Break up her family?" I thought about Mark, about the kids, about all the times I stayed quiet out of loyalty, only for her to treat me like I didn't matter. I remembered how she laughed while exposing my pain to everyone. That's when I realized something. She destroyed her marriage. Not me. I just happened to be holding the truth. And this time, I wasn't going to bury it. Growing up, Catherine was always the favorite, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. I was the messy one, the emotional one, the problem child. But looking back, I realized I was just reacting to how she treated me. When I was 15, I had a huge crush on this guy, Jason. I told Catherine in confidence. A week later, she showed up at my school wearing his jacket. They were dating. She smiled at me like it was nothing, like my feelings didn't matter. And when I cried to our mom, she just said, "Catherine can't help it if boys like her." Another time, I worked on a school project for weeks. I was so proud. Catherine copied it and presented it as her own. When I told the teacher, she called me jealous. Catherine just shrugged and said, "It's not a big deal." My parents sided with her, of course. "Stop making drama, Natalie." She made me feel like I was crazy, like everything that hurt me was my fault. I started to question myself all the time. Then came the therapy suggestion. One night, after another argument where she twisted my words and painted me as unstable, she gently told my parents, "I just worry about her. Maybe she needs help." I didn't. But I went, because they told me it would make me easier to live with. And I believed it. For years. At the dinner last week, when she brought up my teenage mistakes, all those buried feelings came rushing back. I didn't just feel embarrassed. I felt trapped in that same cycle all over again. Her laugh, the way she leaned into her husband and rolled her eyes at me, it wasn't just teasing. It was dominance. A reminder that I'd never win. But this time, something cracked. As I sat there that night, wine untouched, listening to her mock my past, I felt something new. Not anger. Not sadness. Freedom. She had pushed me for the last time. I didn't feel guilty anymore for what I was planning. I didn't feel like the bad sister. I felt clear. Strong. Because now I saw her clearly for the first time. Not as the perfect daughter. Not as the confident wife or charming sister. But as a bully hiding behind a pretty mask. And I was finally ready to tear it off. A few days after the awful family dinner, Catherine sent me a long message. It was full of fake warmth and sugar-coated apologies. She wrote, "I didn't mean to hurt you. Come over this weekend, bring Derek. Let's have a proper family weekend. No drama. Just laughs." I stared at the message for a long time. She really thought I'd fall for it again. But instead of ignoring her or lashing out, I replied with a cheerful, "Sounds great. Can't wait." Derek was hesitant when I told him, "Are you sure this is a good idea?" I smiled. "It's perfect." Catherine lived in one of those picture-perfect homes. White fences, flowers in bloom, kids' drawings on the fridge. Mark, her husband, greeted us at the door with that usual shy smile. He seemed so happy we were all together again. He helped carry our bags in and offered Derek a beer while the kids ran around the backyard. Catherine acted like nothing ever happened. She cooked, she laughed, she complimented my dress. "You look so good lately, Nat," she said sweetly. It was her usual act, putting on the perfect sister face while pretending she hadn't just torn me apart a week earlier. But I matched her energy. I played the part. I helped set the table, played with the kids, and even laughed at her husband's terrible jokes. All weekend, I was cheerful, calm, warm. Derek noticed it too. "You're handling this really well," he whispered. I was. Because I wasn't just there to make peace. I had a plan. And Sunday night would be the moment. Every time Catherine looked away, I noted where she left her phone. I helped Mark with dinner prep and asked little things like, "Do you and Kat ever take couple photos at work parties?" He shook his head. "Nah, Catherine likes to keep work and home separate." Of course she did. That weekend gave me exactly what I needed: Mark's full trust, Derek's quiet support, and Catherine's lowered guard. On Sunday morning, I offered to babysit while Catherine ran errands. I helped the kids with a puzzle and made sure Mark could hear how good I was with them. Everything was going according to plan. That night, Catherine lit candles and made her signature lasagna. She poured wine and toasted to fresh starts. I smiled back and raised my glass. Fresh starts, I echoed. But I wasn't there for a fresh start. I was there to finish what she started at that dinner table. And soon, her perfect world was going to crack, right in front of the man who still thought she was perfect. She had no idea what was coming. Dinner was warm, golden, and filled with fake laughter. Catherine was glowing, telling stories, refilling glasses, holding Mark's hand like she was the world's most loving wife. She wore her favorite pearl earrings, her mom of the year smile, and that air of quiet superiority she always carried like perfume. Mark looked relaxed, sipping his wine, beaming at her like she hung the moon. Derek sat beside me, quietly enjoying the food, unaware of the storm that was building beneath the surface. I played along, telling light-hearted stories about our childhood, how Catherine and I used to fight over the remote, how she always stole the last cookie. Everyone laughed. For a moment, it felt like peace. But Catherine couldn't help herself. She tilted her head and smiled sweetly before saying, "Hey Nat, remember when you crashed Dad's truck and blamed it on a dog? You cried so hard. Dad actually believed you." Everyone chuckled. Mark laughed politely. Even Derek raised an eyebrow, surprised. I smiled back. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I was ready. I set my fork down gently, looked at Catherine, and said calmly, "Actually, I do remember. But you know what else I remember?" The room fell quiet. Catherine's smile twitched slightly, unsure of where I was going. I took out my phone and unlocked the photos. "I remember when you told me you'd only met Daniel for coffee once. I remember the night you swore it was a mistake you'd never repeat. But I also remember seeing you sneaking into his car behind your office. More than once." Mark blinked. The room froze. I placed the phone on the table, screen facing up. A photo of a text conversation lit up. Catherine's name, Daniel's name, hearts, and messages no faithful wife would ever send. Catherine's hand trembled. "Natalie, what are you?" I kept my voice steady. "No more pretending, Catherine. You humiliated me for fun last week, brought up things you knew would hurt. But I've stayed silent for too long. You wanted to tell stories tonight? Well, here's one with real consequences." Mark stared at the phone. His eyes moved slowly across the messages, and I saw the color drain from his face. Catherine reached out. "Mark, it's not what it looks like." But he pulled his hand away. I leaned back in my chair, voice calm. "I'm not here to fight. I'm just here to finally tell the truth." The silence said everything. The moment felt quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that comes just before a thunderstorm. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen. Then I looked at Mark, whose hand was still resting beside his wine glass. He looked up at me, confused, maybe even a little nervous. I opened the gallery. One by one, I placed the photos on the table like evidence in a trial. Screenshots of text messages. Romantic. Explicit. The same number. Over and over, Daniel. Catherine's wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. Mark jolted. Still, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. "Mark," I said softly, almost too gently, "you deserve to know the truth. This has been going on for over a year. Catherine told me it was just one mistake. She begged me to keep quiet for the sake of your kids. And I did. I kept every message, every excuse. Every moment she asked me to help her lie." Catherine's voice cracked. "Natalie, stop. You don't understand." I looked at her, calm and steady. "I understand just fine. You asked me to cover for you. You told me it was done. Then I saw you sneak out to his car. Again. And again." Mark didn't move. He was staring at the phone like he was seeing a ghost. "I'm so sorry, Mark," I said. "But I'm done lying. I'm done pretending she's someone she's not." Catherine's voice turned sharp. "You think you're helping? You're just trying to destroy my family." I turned to her fully now. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "No. You destroyed it. With every lie, every jab, every time you tried to humiliate someone just to feel better about yourself. You don't just hurt people when you're bored, Catherine. You build your whole life on lies." She opened her mouth to argue. I didn't let her. "And I'm done protecting them." The table was silent. Mark slowly stood up. He looked at Catherine, not with anger, not even shock. Just sadness. Deep, quiet sadness. He picked up the phone and walked out of the room. Catherine followed, pleading softly. And I sat there for a moment, breathing. The storm had passed. The truth was out. And for the first time in years, I felt light. Not because I ruined something, but because I finally stopped carrying what wasn't mine. Mark didn't say a word. He just stood up from the table, picked up my phone, and walked away. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Catherine ran after him, her voice breaking, begging, swearing it was a mistake. that it wasn't what it looked like, that I had twisted it. But Mark didn't yell back. He didn't accuse. He just moved with a quiet, tired resolve. I watched through the window as he packed a small bag and gently lifted the kids from their playroom, still in their pajamas. He buckled them into the car, kissed their foreheads, then got into the driver's seat. Catherine was barefoot on the porch, sobbing, clutching his arm, but he didn't flinch. He drove off without ever looking back. I stayed sitting at the dinner table for a minute longer, staring at the broken wine glass, the half-eaten food, the chair where Mark had been. Catherine stumbled back inside, mascara streaked down her cheeks, and her voice cracked as she looked at me. "This is your fault," she whispered. "You ruined everything." I didn't respond. I picked up my bag, walked to the door, and left. Back at Derek's apartment, I felt numb. He poured me a glass of water, then just sat beside me, not saying anything for a while. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "You know that was brutal, right?" I nodded. "I know. But it was honest," he added. "No one's ever told her the truth before." Not really. I wanted to feel victorious. I thought I would. But the truth is, I felt hollow. Like the ground had shifted under me, and I wasn't sure where to step next. Still, something inside me felt lighter. Like I'd been carrying a backpack full of bricks my whole life. And tonight, I finally put it down. Catherine had taken so much from me over the years. My confidence, my peace, even my voice. Tonight, I finally took something back. There was guilt, sure. For the kids. For Mark. For the wreckage I'd left behind. But there was also clarity. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. About no longer letting someone else rewrite my story. I leaned my head on Derek's shoulder, the weight in my chest shifting, settling. For once, I wasn't the problem. And that realization, that felt like freedom. Mark filed for separation a week later. No arguments, no shouting matches, just a quiet, signed decision that signaled the end of everything Catherine had worked so hard to fake. Catherine didn't take it well. At first, it was text after text. Long, desperate messages. Some apologizing, others blaming me. Then came the phone calls, early morning, late night. She even showed up at my job once, waiting outside in her car like some ghost from the past. I didn't answer her calls. I didn't respond to her texts. And when she stood outside the clinic where I worked, crying behind her sunglasses, I walked right past her. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because I finally understood something. Her chaos didn't belong to me anymore. For years, Catherine had used me as her scapegoat. The one she could point to and say, "See? At least I'm not her." She'd used my silence to keep her perfect little world spinning. But that silence was gone. I wasn't playing that role anymore. One night, while I was curled up on Derek's couch, half watching a movie and half dozing, he paused the screen and turned to me. "You know," he said, "you're not the same person I first met." I blinked, unsure if that was good or bad. "You used to let everyone talk over you," he continued. "Even me sometimes. But now, you say what needs to be said. Even if it's hard. Even if it's messy. And I'm proud of you for that." It was strange, how something so painful could lead to something so good. Since that dinner, Derek and I had grown closer. More honest. He stopped tiptoeing around me, and I stopped pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. We talked more, really talked, about our pasts, our fears, what we wanted. There were no more secrets. No more swallowing my hurt to keep the peace. One evening, while we were washing dishes, he handed me a towel and said, "You know, you didn't just expose Catherine. You found yourself again. And I love this version of you." I smiled, the kind of smile that comes from deep inside, where healing begins. Catherine kept spiraling, but I didn't feel responsible for her anymore. I wished her peace, I truly did. But from a distance. I had my own life to build now. One that didn't revolve around her shadow. One rooted in truth, in love, and in finally believing that I deserved better. And this time, I wouldn't let anyone take that away from me. I visited my parents the following weekend. I knew they'd heard everything. Catherine had probably rushed to spin her version before I could even breathe. As I walked in, the tension in the room was thick, like walking into a storm that hadn't fully broken yet. My mom crossed her arms. My dad sat stiffly on the couch. My mom was the first to speak. "Did you really ruin your sister's marriage, Natalie?" I took a deep breath. I didn't flinch, didn't cry. I calmly took out my phone, handed it to them, and said, "Read it." All of it. They scrolled in silence. First came the texts between Catherine and Daniel. Then the photos. Then the messages Catherine had sent me, begging me to stay quiet. You could feel the shift in the air. My dad leaned back, silent. My mom slowly put the phone down. "She told us it was a mistake," she said softly. "One time." I nodded. "It wasn't." I caught her sneaking out 3 more times. She tried to make me the villain for exposing her lies, after humiliating me in front of everyone, for fun. They didn't defend her after that. They didn't apologize either. But something in their eyes changed. Maybe for the first time, they really saw me. I didn't need their full approval. Not anymore. That's the funny thing about telling the truth. It frees you, even if no one claps for it. Catherine still refused to admit she'd done anything wrong. She spun her version to whoever would listen. How I was jealous, how I destroyed her perfect family. But I stopped caring. I didn't know her silence anymore. She wore that mask for so long. The perfect daughter, the loving wife, the doting sister. But all masks crack eventually. All I did was hold up a mirror. And I'm not sorry. Some people wear masks for so long, they think that's their real face. I just helped my sister take hers off. And I don't regret it. Not for a second. What would you have done if you were in Natalie's place? Kept the secret or exposed the truth? I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like this speak to you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.